Catherine, thanks for being here again. I appreciate your availability to this committee to be able to talk through the issues on this. We've talked before about free trade agreements and that this has not been a goal to go get new free trade agreements at this point. It's trying to work with executive agreements and not bringing them back to this committee to be able to work through the process. I think you've heard bipartisan. We want to continue to stay engaged with the administration to be able to work on free trade agreements, and we want to have a bipartisan conversation about the responsibility of Congress to do this. That's an older conversation we have. I was surprised to be able to read that there's discussion at least about a new type of free trade agreement with Japan and with Germany to try to deal with energy and climate issues that's also not coming back here. And I can't figure out how it gains market access and how it's an FTA. So help me understand this conversation about a free trade agreement that's not a free trade agreement, that doesn't really increase market access for American goods that way. It's increasing access for goods coming this way. What is this?
So you and I can have a conversation around the free trade agreements issue, which we have done before, as you've I just want to put a bit of clarification on when I talk about free trade agreements, and I should make this clarification more often. I'm talking about our traditional free trade agreement approach. I believe that there could be an approach that promotes resilience in a much better way and in a way that our traditional approach hasn't. Your second question relates to, I think, critical minerals and the interpretation of a free trade agreement in the Inflation Reduction Act. There, what I would have to do is really point to the guidance from the Treasury Department in the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. And note that that is an interpretation that the Treasury Department has made in its work that is it's part of I would say, a different context than the one strictly that you and I have been in when we've been talking about the free trade agreements.
The one that's always been referenced. I think when everybody writes free trade agreement, there's an assumption of what that means, and suddenly free trade agreement doesn't mean free trade agreement. Even when it's in statute, it doesn't actually mean what everyone has understood. What you say traditionally, I don't know of an exception to that. If there's been an exception to that, I'd be interested to be able to hear on it. But this seems to be a way to work around the Buy American and to be able to now define things that are in Japan and Germany as American for the sake of the Inflation Reduction Act requirement of Buy American. Now suddenly Japanese products and critical minerals are now going to be declared American to be able to come through the process. It seems like a very odd way to be able to do this, and this workaround that's being developed in this new definition. So all I'm trying to figure out is, if we're going to do critical minerals and we're going to try to gain additional critical minerals here in the United States, Japan has the same issue with critical minerals with China that we do on it. It doesn't help to then just declare China part of the United States and then say we're just going to get it from there and declare it American when it's actually Chinese. Does that make sense?
So let me just say, I think that there are a lot of things that we agree on in your presentation, which is that critical minerals are critical. They're critical to our future and our economy. That we have significant supply chain challenges with respect to our access to critical minerals and where critical mineral deposits are right now actively being exploited and being made available to the world market. And third, what I would say is that in terms of addressing our supply chain vulnerabilities with respect to critical minerals, it is something that we cannot do alone, that we have to do with our partners. And that is what we are trying to do with respect to the current exercise.
Totally agree. We got to be able to expand to friends and relationships and all those things. That's a good thing. I just have a hard time declaring suddenly a new definition of free trade agreement that doesn't have market access and then saying this meets the Buy American standard when it's actually not done in America. That just seems a little odd to me in that. Can I ask a separate question? I know we don't have much time on this. It's about the Abraham Accords. It's one of the things we've talked about with foreign policy, extending our foreign policy, also extending to our trade policy. What are we doing actively right now to expand our input and trade relationships with those in the Abraham Accords?
So we have a number of existing free trade agreements from 15 to 20 years ago with countries in the Middle East. We have, in the last months and weeks, I think most recently just a week or two ago, been engaging with those partners through our TIFA agreements and arrangements, and also through the committee set up in our FTAs. And so as part of our work is to be part of the foreign policy toolbox, we are bringing our tools to bear.
Great. Thank you. Please keep doing that.
I thank